Oh, hello, and welcome back to Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. I'm one of your co-hosts this evening, Andrew or Blue, and I'm joined by several others if they would be happy to say hello.
I'm Justin. I'll be co-hosting this week as well.
Hello, I'm Brett.
I'm Cody. They let me on this week because I run the behind the scenes stuff, not because I should be here. So there's that.
It's true. Cody does run it on the back end for us.
Oh.
And yeah, topic of tonight, you guessed it, we did a console-tastic adventure a couple months ago. I forget the episode number, but Cody, feel free to chime in. Super Nintendo. Tonight, we are going to go with the counterpart to the 90s console war, the Sega Genesis. So really, we're going to be ranking our top 10 games, but a little bit of banter, a little bit of back story of what our journey with the console was, what your personal experience was, and then what your favorite games are. So hopefully there will be some actual disagreements this time, and maybe Cody will storm off and get a Smirnoff Ice at some point. But yeah,
you're too late. I started with it this week.
He's
just kidding. It's
Speaking of
Bacardi
things
Sunset
from the
Punch.
90s.
Yeah.
I'm going to show my fellow host, though, how much I've upped my game here for my drinks behind the scenes. I have one on ice.
Wow.
For when this one is gone. How do you like that?
It's like a can of rosé.
Some what is this?
Good old box wine.
I don't know what company this is, but it's a Moscow Mule in a can, and they're delicious. I had one last night just to get in the mood for this podcast.
Yeah. Honestly, Moscow Mules are delicious. So you'll have to tell us as a break how that tastes. Yeah. So anywho, to topic. Curious just to kick it off. What are folks' experience with the Sega Genesis? Oftentimes we're talking about the generation of where we still visited our neighborhood friends. Like, one of you might have a Sega Genesis down the street. Mm-hmm. One of you had one in your home. And so our exposure to that might be all over the place, but just curious, what are people's experience with the Sega Genesis firsthand?
I guess I'll start being the co-host. For me, the Sega Genesis was the first gaming system I bought with my own money. Prior to that, I had an Atari 7800 and believe it or not, an Intellivision that I inherited from a cousin of mine who gave it to me when he got a shiny new NES. But this was the first like current gen, shiny new thing that I picked up. I worked like an entire summer just doing odd jobs for my neighbors and things until I had enough money to go in and buy this thing. And at that point, the Super Nintendo wasn't out yet, so it was the Genesis or the NES, and the Genesis just looked so much shinier. So I went in, got it, and I was a Sega kid pretty much from that point until, well, I had a Genesis, I had a Sega CD, I had a 32X. I drank the Kool-Aid pretty much up until the 32-bit era. At which point my parents realized, well, you've got these add-on things and you've got like 1 or 2 games for each of them. And we're not going to buy you the Saturn because you're probably only going to get 1 or 2 games for that or something like that. So I couldn't really blame them for that. But man, I had a blast with my Genesis, blast processing, if you will. Tish. But yeah, it was a huge part of my formative years. And I've got some really great memories from games that came out for it.
Well, I had the Genesis. I explained this once the last time, I think, when we were probably doing the Super Nintendo one, where I had to like swap systems as I like grew from one to the next. But I did have the Genesis and the Super Nintendo at the same time, and I played both of them, I would say, fairly evenly. I had several games for each that I enjoyed quite a bit, but I definitely spent plenty of time on my Genesis through my my early mid-teen years, and I know not that I'm trying to brag or anything. I had probably like a dozen games or so, something like that. I had a pretty decent, good selection. We always, as we do back there, you go ahead and rented the games, and so there was plenty of other games I played as well. But I enjoyed my Genesis. I had a few of these games I have on my list here are some that are still fairly high on my all-time list. So, yeah.
Cody, why don't you jump in there?
Yeah, I don't get this whole Sega thing. I don't really know what's going on here. Listen, I was confused when I saw the Genesis for the first time because I couldn't find the word Nintendo on it, no matter how much I looked. So that was confusing to me. And yeah, no. So, well, here's the thing. My Genesis exposure is really limited. So our friend Justin had one that I played sometimes at his house. And then so Justin had one at his house and Brett had one in his tent when he went camping. So that was really the times I played Genesis, because Brett always roughed it when he went camping. So
as you do when you go camping.
As you do when you go camping with your TV in your tent and your Genesis in your tent. But yeah, obviously this has been established before, but I've pretty much been a Nintendo purist the whole time. So this was always like the rival console to me. And then don't even get me started on PlayStation when that comes along. But it's in retrospect, I've softened on a lot of these stupid things that I had when I was younger, so I will say I respect the Genesis, which is something I wouldn't have said back then. And it's just it was an alternate system that I didn't spend much time with, so I can't speak a lot to it. I'm kind of, like I said, the odd person out here this week in terms of experience. But yeah, I've just softened to the point where I've enjoyed its place in culture and nostalgia, and I've kind of weakened my views on all these things I used to hate, like the Beatles and Kiss and Rush and Queen, even a little bit. So I'm coming around to stuff as I'm getting older.
Yeah, thanks for everyone's perspective so far. I actually grew up with the Sega Genesis as well. My dad bought it at the Base Exchange when he got it one day, and it came with I believe with the Sonic the Hedgehog pack in. So probably around 1991 when that would be. Didn't have we had a Sega Master System before that growing up, so we had actually both Sega consoles in the States before. Obviously we didn't have a Saturn here in my family, similar to Justin's experience. We had 32X and Sega CD, and much like I think is nice in the history of Sega is kind of the beginning end of the downfall of Sega, and just some politics with the company, and Sega Japan versus Sega of America, and some of those console wars that were going on between Sega and Nintendo. But much like many consumers, we had households who had a Sega Genesis and 2 add-ons for it, and then the 32-bit successor that was a disc-based called the Saturn confused a lot of people and upset them, because not only was the Saturn like the most expensive console at launch, people were already feeling like, we already have this console, we put like this much money, and you're deciding to launch this one. But that's more of a tangent. I really grew up with the Genesis. I loved it. There's lots of great games on it. I also equally respect the Super Nintendo. There's technical things that are better about it. I think the Super Nintendo has a better sound chip, and most oftentimes the sprite work, even if there's a cross port, and the Konami games are a great example of this, is usually graphically the Super Nintendo is better. And it really takes a special composer on the Genesis to outdo most soundtracks on the Super Nintendo. So that said, I feel like we would probably jump into what are some of our honorable mentions, or
that was always a weird thing too, right? Because isn't it established, I guess, that like some games were better on one system and some were better on the opposite system? So it was always weird to me that there wasn't like a consistent,
Yeah. I mean, I think like I'd love the other folks to jump in, but like Capcom, for example, produced most of the Disney games on the Super Nintendo, whereas oftentimes it was either Virgin or a different studio that would be producing like Aladdin, for example, or Lion King. Those would often be different producers, and so it's an apples and oranges comparison between those two games in title only. But the Konami games are a really good example, because they're almost the exact same game if they were ported to one versus the other.
So we're starting with honorable mentions, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess do we want to do like all of the honorable mentions that we have at once, or do we just to get them out of the way? Or
yeah, why don't you do all yours and then we'll
go
through.
Okay.
Show us yours.
Okay, so building off
Show
of
me
what you
yours, I'll
said
show you
with,
mine.
I thought this was a family show.
Not
But
for
no,
quite a few episodes now.
but building off of what Blue was saying about how different versions of games from system to system had some things that were very sometimes starkly different between them, leads me to my first honorable mention, Earthworm Jim, where the Genesis version actually had an entirely separate level, like an extra level that the Super Nintendo version didn't have. Great platformer, very weird, but it had a very distinctive art style, a lot of replayability, but I went back and played it again recently, and it doesn't quite hold up like I remembered. Other honorable mentions I have are Shining Force 2, an incredible game, tactical RPG in the style of Fire Emblem, but it didn't have the depth of a Fire Emblem game. It had a neat setting, sort of a fantasy future. So you had elves and dragons, but also like tanks and robots and things that were all kind of together, fighting for the fate of the world. I always liked the setting. The art was great, but very overshadowed by games that came after it. The Konami or the Castlevania and Contra games that came out on the Genesis were also pretty good, but very hard, especially Contra. In a weird reversal of the natural order of things, the US actually got the harder version of Contra Hardcore. The Japanese version had a life meter, so you could actually take a few hits before you died. That was gone in the US release, and it made the game just absolutely punishing. So
nice.
Yeah. So it did have. Oh, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I feel like that's not always what happens, right? I feel like which version of like Bare Knuckle 3, for example, I forget if Streets of Rage 3 was harder or
I've never beaten
Bare
Streets
Knuckle
of Rage
3
3 because
I know it's hard, but
yeah,
which
yeah.
one was harder?
Yeah,
that's what she said.
So, last honorable mention, and this one was hard. I really toyed with putting this on the top 10, but because of a few unfair bosses, I left it off. Splatterhouse 3. A great brawler. It had multiple endings. You could really screw things up and still keep going. It had a time mechanic where if you didn't get through levels fast enough, very bad things would happen. Like your wife would, the line "Jennifer is beginning to smell of rot" is always stands out to me. It was a very dark game and very different from anything else at its time. But it just got unfairly hard at certain parts. So that's why it's not in my top 10. That's my last honorable mention.
Makes a lot of sense now, Justin. It's just the impressionable child in playing murder games. It's like Congress was right? They're making our children violent.
Hey, they've never proved I've killed anyone.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So I'll throw mine in here next. So as I tend to do in no particular order here, and I won't go into real much detail on these, but I have several honorable mentions here, including Mortal Kombat 2, Rampart, which we mentioned a little bit in the Super Nintendo episode, but I played mine mostly on the Genesis here and really enjoyed. Sonic 3, and mainly because not because I don't think Sonic 3 doesn't deserve to be in the top 10, but because I already had another one in there, I just decided I just stick this one down here out of the top 10. Altered Beast, which was it wasn't like a great, like, well produced game, but it was fun. It was, and just the theme of it was really kind of cool to play, where you essentially are like a
furry,
a morphing a furry, yeah. But you just, if you get enough energy power ups, I don't even remember how you play. I think when you get enough power, then you could change your whatever it was. I don't remember.
Yeah, you get 2 orbs and then boom, you turn into a wolf.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
but only after you rip your shirt off.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yes.
And don't forget that digitized speech. Why is from your wave?
That's great. Yeah. Also, I had I had this on my top 10 for a bit, and then I had some other things I had thought of, and I bumped it out. But Golden Axe 2 was a great game I spent a lot of time in, and And I also had Streets of Rage 2, which I know a lot of people would
What's in their honorable mentions?
Yeah,
This is over. We're done.
Who let this guy in here?
And the only reason I don't have my top 10 is not because it's a great game, but because I just didn't play it enough. The other games I have on my list, I played hours and hours and hours more than that. So
that's fair.
Yeah,
that is fair. Yeah. I feel like I just build off a +1, so a couple have already been mentioned. So Castlevania Bloodlines, Contra Hardcore, and then I think I mentioned it before as maybe one of my honorable mentions in Super Nintendo, but Turtles Hyperstone Heist, completely new level, some different parts from its Super Nintendo port. So I really like that one. Doesn't crack my top 10 though. And then I'm usually not a sports fan. I love NBA Jam. I would include it as an honorable mention. Played the living crap out of that one as a Pacers when I lived in Indiana. But a game that I've played, but not too often, but really just denotes a spot on an honorable mention is NHL 94. I think it is the defining game. Was better than the Super Nintendo port and is to this day like one of the best hockey games that has ever been made. And then probably doesn't crack the top 10 for me, but RoboCop versus Terminator, really, really good game. Super violent. Definitely, again, Congress would be like, oh my goodness, what's happening to the kids playing the games? That one was fantastic. I remember playing it with a friend in Ohio. We got to a certain stage and he paused it and we went to bed and did the old leave the console on overnight because we've made it so far in the game. And then like he immediately died the like moment he turned it off of start and got the game over. So and my final one's kind of an outside the box. I didn't have it personally, but I think it's really cool as far as a part of gaming history. But the Sega Channel. So it was like the first streaming of games in essence. Basically, it was through Time Warner cable. You basically hooked up your coax cable to this cartridge and plugged it in, and you would literally get a list of games that would change over months. Obviously just a collector's item nowadays, but it was really cool to be like, oh yeah, I don't have that cartridge. Like it's instead of, going to Blockbuster, you get a nice rotation of games each month. Be lightning quick, as fast as like however much a megabyte of data could travel via coax. It's pretty speedy, and I feel like it's, the precursor to things like what's the big stream Stadia with Google? It wouldn't be here without the Sega Channel.
I'm not sure it's here now. I haven't heard anyone mention that in months.
Yeah.
I was not aware that Sega had that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It is pretty ahead of its time, seems like.
That is probably like Sega's namesake is, taking a lot of risks, probably a little too many on top of all the marketing and whatnot, but they did a lot of cool, innovative things at the time.
Yeah, because weren't the Fantasy Star games, those were online also, right?
The first two were not, but basically, the Dreamcast was, or maybe not. I think the Saturn had some net functionality, but
not on the Genesis.
But the Dreamcast was the first like true online console. So definitely takes risks.
And it was the first 4 Fantasy Stars that were not online, actually. So FYI.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Are we up to my honorable mentions here?
Let's hear them.
I told the rest of the house before we started that they could either include these in the aggregates or not, because this is showing not having played a lot of these. So I have 3 honorable mentions. The first is Road Rash, which I know I did play and did enjoy quite a bit. Not much to say about that, just motorcycle violence. It was just a good time. Second one is Sonic the Hedgehog Part 3, which I'm sure I played at some point, but have no actual distinct memories of playing said game. And the third one here, I believe I did play this on the Genesis as well as now in person many times with a certain other host who's not here. And this is Michael Jackson's Moonwalker.
Yeah.
Is,
you have to mention it for Joe.
Gotta mention it for Joe. Michael Jackson shooting goo from his hands to protect and save little kids. What's possibly wrong about this 20 years later?
Yeah, perfect sense.
Yep, those are my honorables.
Cool. Well, then let's see, like what's crack. Do we just want to go sequentially and start with 10?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I prefer to start with 7.
7 it is. What's your 7th game?
Go from
Then,
7 to
Brett?
2 and then back to 10.
So who wants to kick things off?
Go ahead, Justin.
Okay. Well, I'm probably going to just completely throw the metrics off with my number 10. And I am doing number 10, regardless of conflicting views. A game called El Viento, which is Spanish for the wind. And I didn't know that until years later. But it was a platformer. And it was one of the most just bonkers things I had played at the time. I wouldn't objectively necessarily call it a good game, but I played so much of it that it has a real soft spot in my heart. Basically, you play this girl who throws boomerangs and uses magic in 1920s Chicago, trying to stop Al Capone from summoning an elder god on top of a skyscraper.
Sure.
That stuck with me because so you're going through, you're fighting like tanks, you're fighting demons, you're fighting giant amoebas, you're fighting cavemen at one point. It was, you never quite knew what you were going to run into in this thing. And I loved it. The art style, it was low res because it was an early Genesis game, but it was distinctive. The enemies had personality. Some of the bosses were really creative. It's not necessarily a good game, but it's one that I still love to this day.
Yeah, that is not one I can't say I've ever heard of that one. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know we were just making games up. That's cool. I'm can't wait for my turn.
All right, I'll jump in here, I guess. Number 10. This was a game that I played. I played quite a bit of with my other friends here locally, and it was a lot of fun. It was General Chaos. Nobody else had it, but it's pretty cool. It's like a real-time kind of military tactics, essentially. And it's kind of like an isometric view of the field, and you had 2 teams, red and blue squads, and each team had 5 units on it, and you could pick from a default set of various units. And so just for example, you had like machine gunners, you had like rocket launcher units, people throwing grenades, you had a flamethrower guy, you had a guy who was like tossing a brick of TNT around, but you picked like this from this group. You'd like say you had like one was like all 5 machine gunners, and then you had like another set that was like one of each, and then you actually could do like there was like a weird one where you could pick like only 2 units. I don't remember exactly how that worked, but I remember that being a thing. And essentially you're just trying to take out the other team, the opposite side, and you had a lot of different maps with different various terrain and obstacles and things that go around. And what's cool, you could play this in solo, you could play it in 2-player versus 2-player co-op, and you could actually play it in 4-player if you had the the 4-player
multi-tap.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty cool game. There wasn't a lot to it. I mean, what I described is basically the whole game. There was a campaign mode where you're trying to like go across a map and like seize everything on this map. But it wasn't like you got to. I don't think you could even could pick where you just start from one end of the map and went together. It wasn't like you could pick where you went next. But it was fun. It was like I say, it wasn't wasn't a lot to it, but it was enjoyable. So
nice. Go ahead, Cody.
All right, my number 10 is El Phantasmo and the Chicken Run. It was produced by White Zombie for the Sega Genesis originally, and
what is that Spanish for?
It's Spanish for I will later make scary movies featuring my wife. So that's what that is. No, I'm just kidding. My number 10 is Yoshi Island 64. Are we doing? Okay, I'll throw a Sega game out here. How about this?
Would you?
My number 10 is
Zach Galifianakis.
More of what people loved. It's Sonic the Hedgehog Part 2 is my number 10.
No, it's not Part 2. Jesus Christ.
sorry. Sonic : 2.
Yes, nice.
Did I do that right?
The Reckoning.
Yes. I was never good at Sonic games because I didn't play them enough to get to know how to go to the right spots to be good at them. But I was always intrigued because the games were just so different than like Mario as the face of the franchise, base platformer, for Sega compared to Mario. So we have, what did we buy? We just bought Sonic Mania for Boston, which I actually
so good.
I still have not played since we have bought it. There's so many
God.
games I haven't played since we bought them, but I got to get down and try it because it looks fun. So, but I'm going with classic part 2 on this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I would almost lump 2 games in here to cheat, but I would say Genesis was marketed as like being very arcade equivalent, and so I'm gonna go with Yu Suzuki's Outrun, which is one of the Genesis version is probably like as close to the arcade game you can get without, playing it at home. So really love Outrun. You're basically in a Ferrari and the stage moves along with you. It branches as you get towards a checkpoint, and it can go left or right, and it changes the stage. So lots of replay value depending on what sort of difficulty you want. Pretty synonymous with another racing game though, Super Hang-On, which is you're on a motorbike and similar things involved, that you are going through stages and trying to beat a ticking clock that reduces down to 0 and then game over. So really easy to play a couple rounds. Even as I get older and don't have as much time, I always like firing up Outrun and seeing what's going on there. This day I haven't beat it, but get really close and then you're like, shit, I'm almost there. And then you're like, starts ticking down to single digits and you're like, I'm not gonna make it.
Get good.
Yeah, I know, right?
Okay, is it back to me for number 9?
Number 9.
Okay,
number 9. Insert graphic.
All right, so mine is Master of Monsters, which is a game I probably never would have heard about if my local video store hadn't had it. But it was a hex-based strategy game where basically you could choose one of. Not quite. It was about territory control though.
Okay.
So you chose like one of 4 different characters, and they each had their own set of units, their own set of spells that you could play with. Units could level up and change into other units, but it was all about taking control of the battle, various points on the battlefield, and basically running your opponents off the map, so to speak. And it had different types of terrain like tundra, forests, deserts, and certain monsters would be better in certain areas. Certain ones would be really weak in certain areas. And it was probably the first video game strategy game that I ever played. And I rented it probably enough times that I could have bought it twice over again. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I'm not sure in terms of complexity how well it holds up to modern games, but for its time, it had a lot of replay value. Not much story, but a lot of different maps and a lot of fun.
Interesting. Number 9 for me, I've got Road Rash 2, which is pretty cool. It essentially was a motorcycle racing game, but you could combat the other racers as you're going along on the road. So it was pretty cool. It was felt pretty fast as you're going along, and it just like the fact that you're fighting other people on their motorcycles was pretty wild. Some of the weapons just include like clubs, chains, like the classic cattle prod, which is what I always went for. That's when I could get it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. You could, it's a win race. You get money, and you could upgrade your bike, go faster, and you could eventually get to different stages and and it actually wasn't like you could win it eventually. I'm not sure that I ever did or not. If I got far enough into the stages, but I played it quite a bit, and there's like, it was fun because there's obstacles like cars, boulders, deer, cows, and one of the most enjoyable, satisfying parts of the game was when you would find another racer that would have been knocked off their motorcycle and running them over as you passed by. sounds horrible, but for a 13-year-old, that was really satisfying. So
yeah,
it was.
Yeah, but yeah, Road Rash 2, number 9.
Were there cops in 2, or was that 3?
3,
or
were they
had
them?
Because I would always remember like you would. I can't remember if you could knock the cop off the bike, but I usually always be a tense moment because if you got knocked off, then you were busted.
Now that you mentioned that, I'm pretty sure there was police that would chase you down.
It's so good because you just hear the sirens and you're like, oh no, like that would be a butt clench moment of
because they were a lot harder than the other racers.
Yeah. Like to this day, I don't know if you can actually knock the police off of the bike because I never did it.
I think the easiest thing to do was to boot them into oncoming traffic. That's what I always did.
Okay,
for kids.
my number 9. I'm pretty sure I played this game back in the day. I'm pretty sure.
Naming things that you like.
Familiar to me. Well, this one has a distinction because this was a Sega game that I played. I'm pretty sure at least a little bit at Justin's, and but it was a tie-in with something from outside of video games, and this would be Spider-Man and Venom Maximum Carnage. Which I had not the whole comic run of Maximum Carnage comic books, but I had quite a few of them, and therefore, like I was big on Marvel at the time. I knew a lot of the lesser characters that were in this, like Firestar and Cloak and Dagger, and some of the other ones that were actually in the game as well, which was kind of cool because it wasn't just, you didn't just play as Spider-Man solo or whatever the case was. So that was kind of cool. And I think this one, if I recall, looked pretty comic booky like on the screen as well. So
yep.
This one, I just remember playing at least a little bit. I'm pretty positive. So that's what I'm going with here. Number 9.
That's a good one. I mean, yeah, you get a lot of niche, superheroes that show up.
Mm-hmm.
And fighting Doppelganger, and man, Carnage is I think he's a bastard. He's one of the best villains in a comic book, in my opinion. That's a good choice, Cody. My number 9, it's hard to say, but I would probably go with, I didn't rank most of these, so by process of elimination, apologies for coming somewhat unprepared. But I would say my number 9 would be, I'm going with it. We're going to go Sonic Spinball.
Wow.
It would have to be there somewhere.
It's going to be there. Yeah. Everyone, the inside joke here is like we had a man night, and evidently my childhood reflexes of playing this game for hours on end took over, and as much everyone else was sitting for like an hour while I finished up. And Justin, I think you came close to, you were the closest competitor of trying to get the high score.
I probably had the most experience with it out of any of the others. But yeah, there was no way I was going to match the like half an hour, 45-minute long performance.
Yeah, it was extraneous. We probably just said, hey, Blue, you win. Let's move on. Can we, like, Joe's already drunk. Joe's asleep. Fontana went to go get a pudgy. And in hindsight, I mean, I love that game. I've never beaten it, so it's like it's kind of a dumb, but it's a fun crossover of a pinball game that involves Sonic. Don't even think Yuji Naka made it. Maybe he has like a credit on there, but a nice little, footnote in Sonic the Hedgehog history.
It just makes me think of the man night where we played Ghosts and Goblins as one of our events, and like I randomly killed like the 4th enemy of the first stage, and he dropped this thing that was worth like 10,000 points or something, and therefore I won.
Yeah,
so many arbitrary things.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay, back to me. My number 8 is Dragon's Fury, known in non-prudish parts of the world as Devil's Crush. This was a pinball game with, I believe, 7 different tables.
Motley Crue?
Not Crew Ball. Not Crew Ball. That one was fun too. But no, this was more like an occult themed one. So it had like dragons, and like there was a devil that vomited up ghosts in one part, and yeah, it really well designed stages, a lot of hidden stuff, a lot of secret stuff, and it's pinball. I mean, you can play it pretty much forever, and yeah, it is one that I will still boot up and play sometimes just because it's such a blast.
All right, coming in number 8 for me, I had Star Control, which was pretty cool. It was a top-down view 2D spaceship combat game, and probably what made this game really great was the large variety of different ship types that you had that really lended to a lot of different strategies. So if you had, you might have a ship that's slow but really tough and has like hard-hitting weapons, or you have like a fast one that's a little bit weaker in the weapons, but you can zip around this big lumbering guy. And so led to a lot of different types of strategies that you could employ. And yeah, one of the best parts of it was there was always a planet in the middle of the map somewhere, and the planet had like a gravity kind of system to it, and you could use it to like slingshot around the planet. So you could do a lot of like fun maneuvers and stuff around the planet. But the best part was you could get one of these like large ships like close to the planet and then like bump him into it, and he just like couldn't pull away from the gravity. He would just keep smacking into the planet and eventually die. That was great. But it also had a really cool campaign mode. You could play, a solo player campaign where you eventually it had the way they managed it was like this rotating view, but it was like a 3D Starfield map, and you would start at one end of the Starfield, and you would have to like go from star to star, conquering them, and then developing them and getting like an economy so you could buy more ships and build more like ship eras and stuff. And that part of it was really pretty cool. And kind of one of the earlier games that I played where it was like a civilization kind of like building your little thing. So but yeah, that was a great game. I played that a ton, and like I say, just a lot of variety, a lot of fun in it. So
awesome. That sounds like one I'd enjoy. This is my number 8 game. I didn't write notes for these this week, but if I had written notes for number 8, I'd probably say like parentheses, this game is dumb, but it's iconic. So I'm going to go with my number 8 choice here, which has already been mentioned, I believe.
Cool spot. Got it.
It is El Viento. No, I'm kidding. It is Altered Beast, which I just remember smashing buttons and having dumb fun with the little stupid kick the guy did, and powering up and becoming monsters and different levels having different. You basically were different monsters and different levels, right? Is that you had like the dragon level and the crazy wolf level, and was there like a bear too for a while? You could be
bear, tiger. I think it's like 6 stages. Yeah. Was there a rhino?
I think so.
Maybe. But that was a fun one. I remember playing that quite a bit. So that's my number 8.
Nice. My number 8 is, I'll keep the comic book theme here from Cody's past round and use DC Universe. I feel like anyone else here a fan of like the Batman animated series that was on Fox? Yes. Probably when we were kids. There is a
game,
Adventures of Batman and Robin. It's not a like traditional beat 'em up. It's actually kind of like a run and gun in some aspects. Like you basically are throwing boomerangs or batarangs and whatnot. But it's also fairly comic based. Like it looks just similarly cell shaded to it really keeps the spirit of the cartoon. I love the animation of the cartoon. I feel like the cartoon itself is one of the best Batman series, in addition to like obviously the greats of Adam West and whatnot. But love Batman the animated series.
Cool.
Didn't own this game, rented it multiple times just because I loved it. And yeah, definitely a great game. If you haven't tried it, you should give it a go.
I'm kicking myself for having forgotten about that one.
Oh, it's cool. I mean, it's cool. I mean, none of ours. I mean, I haven't heard some, a couple that have already been mentioned. So it's pretty cool to dabble in some different things.
Okay, I think it's back to me. Number 7, Sonic 2. It was everything from the first one, but better. It added the spin dash, so you didn't have to be in motion to start rolling and hit enemies. You could just like press down, start tapping the button, and rocket off across the screen. The levels were bigger, the colors were brighter. Some of the music still gets stuck in my head, like the Chemical Plant Zone theme. Mm-hmm. Every once in a while, that'll just click.
How's that go?
Yeah, I started at a different point than Blue did, but yeah, it's a banger. So yeah, it's just everything about the first game, but better. I don't know if Tails really added much to it, but it introduced a new character to the series, which was kind of neat. But yeah, just an absolutely fantastic platformer.
That was like the time where I feel like Sonic the Hedgehog felt fast. Like the first one felt fast, but just the way that they did the animation on Sonic 2, especially in Chemical Plant Zone, where you're like going so fast. But like Sonic will go, if you're like actually playing the game as intended, he will go so fast on that stage where he will go off the screen and the screen will just and it's really quite clever programming to Yuji Naka and that team. In fact, I think that was like not a time that game was developed in the States by Sega of America. Like Yuji Naka's team came to the States to make that game.
And one other footnote about that, Sonic 2 was the first game to be released on the same day everywhere worldwide. I remember it being called Sonic Tuesday. It was like advertised in magazines and everything. But prior to that, some stores would get a game at some point, others would get it at another point. Sonic 2 was the first game to just nail down a single release date across the board. And that's historic.
I believe you mean Sonic Tuesday. Am I doing this right, Joe? I don't understand.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Number 7, I have one of the quirkiest games I've ever played, and actually Justin mentioned this already, but Toe Jam and Earl was the story. Not that the story really to be like, man, like had value to the game, but Toe Jam and Earl, I think, like these alien rappers apparently who have crash landed on Earth, and the goal of the game is to collect all the pieces of their spaceship so you can just like Lego them back together and take off, I suppose. Because but it's funny, it's supposed to be Earth, but I've never seen anywhere on Earth that looks like those levels look like.
Wyoming.
It it's just everything about it was just kind of crazy and weird, and the whole soundtrack was like really funky, this kind of crazy music. It was really catchy, and everything in it was just like weird. It probably was, even though you get some of the stuff in Mario is like kind of like, well, what the hell is this? but Toe Jam and Earl was like, the game was like, I at that point in my life, I didn't know what drugs would do to you, but if I had known, I would have been like, someone was on drugs when they made this game. Yeah, it was just fun and crazy. I don't know that I ever beat it.
I did once, but it was luck. Because
it does, RNG.
Yeah, it was a roguelike essentially because all the levels were randomly generated.
Mm-hmm. But
wow.
I had a lot of fun with it. I never owned it, but I rented it more than once, multiple times. So yeah, there you go.
That's one I recognize as like a cult following, but I think I may have seen it played a little bit, but I don't think I ever played it myself. My number 7 game is one of only a few on my list here tonight that was on both Super Nintendo and Sega both, but I did play this one on both systems, and this is going to be Mortal Kombat 2, which was just a solid fighting game at the time. I've always been more of a Street Fighter person, so there's that, but this one I think just it looked good. And then didn't the Sega, is this for 1 and 2? How did that work with the blood for Mortal Kombat? Didn't like Sega have it for the first one and Nintendo didn't or something?
Yeah, Nintendo, you had to do some sort of cheat code, but
like
you could just toggle it. Yeah, it was like by default on the Genesis.
Okay.
Edgy for teens.
And this one had the like additional beyond the fatality and all the babality and the friendship and the other stupid things that now I look back and I'm like, why did I spend so long trying to do this stupid animation? Like I don't.
And toasty.
Yeah. But this is a fun one. It was a solid fighting game. Like I said, I've always been more of a Street Fighter, but I do enjoy a game of Mortal Kombat once in a while. So Mortal Kombat 2 is my number 7.
Cool. I feel like I'm with Brett here. Toe Jam and Earl is my 7 as well.
Nice.
It's funky, it's weird, it's iconic of the 90s. It's just, you're like, oh, put this game in there and be like, this is what the 90s are all about. I'd be like, yeah, that's right. It's just so weird. And so there's weird power-ups. I forget there was like rocket skaters. Yeah. Just more often than not, those would cause me to die or fall to the level below.
You can throw tomatoes at people.
Yeah. And it was also, I don't know if we mentioned it, but it's like pretty fun if you do it co-op too. Like it's
right. Yeah, I didn't mention that, but yeah.
You can do co-op. It's often at times hard because you're working on the same screen together, but it would also tear if you got far enough away from you, which I thought was some clever way of approaching the co-op aspect of the game. So Toe Jam and Earl, our first commonality here.
Nice.
6.
All right, number 6. I went back and forth on this one because I knew I wanted one of these games to be on here, and eventually I decided Phantasy Star 2, because Phantasy Star 4 was a strong contender, but 2 just did so much right. It was the first sci-fi themed RPG I ever played. So the basic setup is you're on this planet where most of the habitable places are under domes, and everything is controlled by this supercomputer out in the middle of nowhere, and it's starting to malfunction. It's starting to make freakish monsters. The environment is starting to go wacky. So you are sent off on a quest to figure out what's gone wrong and try to fix it. And it was such a different take on the princess has been captured, or the demon lord has awakened. It was different, it was fresh, and graphically it was just great. I mean, really a lot of definition on the sprites for both the characters and the enemies. It had little cutscenes, kind of Ninja Gaiden style in a way. It was a great game. And spoilers for a 30-year-old RPG, you fight through all this, you defeat the big bad evil thing, and you find out the true enemy all this time is humanity. Like, everyone on this planet, you're not humans, you're something else. And the human race has come from somewhere from space to try and claim this planet and wipe you out, and everything they've tried has failed. So the final scene is you and the rest of your party facing off against essentially the entire human race, and it fades to black. And
Are we the baddies, John?
Yeah. So it's implied that you went through all this struggle, all this hardship, you think you won, and then in the end you're up against odds you just can't beat. And that was a twist that I had never seen in a game up to that point. It was amazing at the time.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I love it. It's a good game. It's really grindy and difficult. Like, if you don't,
yeah, definitely.
I mean, I feel like that's just the 90s and games in general, like that was the replay value, so you'd spend more time on it. But man, I do like Phantasy Star 2 as well.
Mm-hmm.
Coming in at my number 6 here, I've got Madden 95, which, a lot of these, Sega had the big EA Sports contract for all these, so they had everything. They had, as you mentioned, Blue, the NHL games. We had either 94 or 95 of that as well, and I played that a ton as well. But the one I played the most, I think, was Madden 95, and it was really pretty cool. This was the first year that they had the actual NFL licensing, so the actual player names were in the game and not just these random stuff. And it essentially was it's the exact same formula that Madden games have had for the last 25 years. It's the exact same thing. You pick your plays in the playbook, you pick it, you run it, you can kind of switch stuff out as as you're in the middle of the play. But it was pretty good. From previous years, they had it felt like it had much better character controls, and you had different actions that you could do. It certainly wasn't like Tecmo Bowl where you couldn't do anything, all you just let it happen. There was a lot of things you could do, juke people out and dive and all this other stuff. And I don't know if this was the first year that they had, I don't know if 94 or previous years had it, but 95 had a character creator, and we used that a lot. My brother and I and our friend Adam from across the street, we made all kinds of, made ourselves in the game, made other things in the game, but we had a lot of fun with that as well. So yeah, Madden 95, number 6.
I was trying to think if I had played many sports games on Sega. I feel like I might have played some at some point, but I just can't really recall any of them. But yeah, when I was looking through the 900 games or whatever came out for the Genesis, I was like, holy shit, there's a lot of sports games in here. It was nuts. They were running 3-4 different football franchises at the same time for years, and I was like, whoa, that's okay. All right, my number 6 game has already been mentioned, so I forget if it was for points. Might have been, so this might be another contender here. It's Road Rash 2, which we've already covered pretty well here, but again, Road Rash was in my honorables, and this is souped up improved version. I know I played this once in a while at Justin's house as well. Just kind of what you all said, just really fun, like vehicular mayhem, but on motorcycles, and that's always fun. I don't feel like there's actually been a lot of those games recently, or popular at least, where you can like drive and blow other racers up. It's kind of a underrepresented genre, I feel like, in today's world. I don't know if I'm off on that or if just haven't been exposed to them or what, but that's my number 6.
Nice. That is, we've got a couple here on the tally. I'll keep the suspense to the end, but looks like even between your honorable mentions, since we don't know what you're going to come up with, Cody, just tally in here and see what our aggregate is. My 6 is a platformer. It is one of the earlier Genesis games, but keeping the arcade theme, it's Flicky. It's this little blue bird that basically the goal is kind of, the screen follows like a Defender format where it repeats. And so it kind of just, you get to one side of the screen and it turns back over. You're this little blue bird that needs to save little yellow chicks, and there's cats and lizards and other things. And Flicky can interact with the stage and grab something that's usually like a chair and hurl it. And really cute small sprites. The bird can jump, but he can't quite fly. So he has a little float to him when he jumps. But yeah, the goal is just to make this chain of little chicks and then get them to an exit. And then, yeah, pretty fun. Again, one that you can quickly pick up. It's a early Genesis game, and it's a lot of fun. And, a lot of fun memories of playing that game over and over.
Never heard of that game. Apparently, Flicky has a cameo in Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, though, from 2007.
Yeah, he's cultural impact. He's an icon.
Who knew?
Okay, number 5. So my number 5 is Beyond Oasis, known in other parts of the world as the story of Thor, I think, which it doesn't entirely fit because it doesn't have a whole lot to do with Norse mythology. But anyway, naming conventions for games are weird. But this is one of Sega's answers to The Legend of Zelda. It was a later entry in the catalog for the Genesis, but had very high quality graphics, had levels that were very expansive, a decent story. The game mechanics involved summoning different spirits to help you solve puzzles and defeat enemies. So there was like a fire spirit, a water spirit, one that was attached to shadows and mirrors, and there was a fourth one that I think was plants, I want to say. But yeah, some really interesting uses of them. There was a hidden area where it was like a 100-level dungeon where if you got to the end of it, you got something special. I never got to the end of it, but you could use the spirits you had in really interesting ways in combat. Like if you were fighting slimes, you could use the water spirit to like do stuff with the slimes because they were liquid. Things like if you were fighting something that was wearing armor, it was reflective. You could use the shadows and mirror spirit to do stuff with them. A lot of really interesting mechanics, and it was just a lot of fun, especially as someone who was a Sega kid, didn't have access to the Zelda games, so this was kind of eye-opening for me.
Yeah, I don't know that I know anything about that game, but those mechanics sound like they're pretty cool.
Yeah,
really interesting.
It reminds me a lot of like and I grew up with Beyond Oasis and played it a little bit. It reminds me a lot of like the Mana series too. Like
yes.
both Zelda, and if you took like the Mana aspects of it. If you're familiar with like the Secret of Mana games or Mana games on Super Nintendo.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. It just didn't have the party aspect. You were just one guy for the most part. Yeah,
true.
Cool. Number 5 for me, I have a game that Justin mentioned last round, which is Phantasy Star 2, and this is definitely one I actually just replayed it. I don't say it was like 2 years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And as you said, it's a sci-fi RPG, which is a little bit kind of underused topic. And it was had the classic kind of top-down style walking around the overworld. Combat was pretty cool because it was like a menu-based, turn-based kind of thing where you like choose all your actions and then you hit go, and then that determines people you would fight, and then like one of the enemies would take a turn, and so things would sometimes you wouldn't get to your actions that you intended to happen. But that was pretty cool. And one of the notes I had here was it was the first 6 megabit memory cartridge game came out. So it was much larger than a lot of the other games that had come out previously that just had more substance to it. It was also really fun because you had a party of 4 characters, up to a max of 4. You didn't always have 4. But you could pick characters from a larger pool, which I think the most you get was like 7 or 8. I can't remember now off the top of my head.
Sounds right.
But you picked up to 4 characters to form your team. And it was just a really great story. The characters I felt were pretty memorable, even though there wasn't a lot of story, like backstory to them. And there wasn't like a lot of, there wasn't a ton of kind of inter-character interactions through the game, but you did feel like you got to know these characters, and they were kind of unique. And it was challenging, but really fun combat, and the soundtrack was pretty good as well. So I enjoyed this a lot, and I replayed it, like I said, just a few years ago. So.
Well, I'm at my top 5 here, so I just cracked open a mule now to get into the serious stuff. My number 5 is Mario Paint. It's a lesser-known Japanese import on the Sega Genesis featuring a plumber who's Italian. Makes no sense. Just kidding. My top 5. I'm getting into the 5 that I probably spent the most time with, so here we go. My number 5 is Streets of Rage 3. Which is just pure button mashing goodness. Our mutual friend Justin loved the Streets of Rage games. I played quite a few of them at his house back in the day, but it was always fun just because Super Nintendo, I don't feel like I played a lot of button mashers that I can really recall. Like they had Final Fight, but I didn't ever have Final Fight. Like I didn't have access to that anywhere. So like this was my primary way to like kind of continue the Double Dragon-ish genre later in life. So I couldn't name a character from this game, so there's that as well. But Streets of Rage 3 had fun with, so that's what I'm going with.
All right. I'm gonna go with Revenge of Shinobi here as my 5th game. Really good. Again, another one of the early games here for Sega Genesis. Actually didn't play. I have the cart. I love. Fun thing about Revenge of Shinobi is there's lots of revisions on the cartridge, and so Sega took a stance of asking for forgiveness as opposed to permission. So Spider-Man is in this game as a boss. I think Rambo or RoboCop, Godzilla. There's lots of characters who clearly have copyrights and licenses, and Sega was like, "What's ever going to make so much money?
What is copyright?"
Yeah. So there's like the original 1.0 game has all these characters, and then they got like sloppy, and they just like made Spider-Man a little less vibrant. And so he's still Spider-Man, but he's just a different color. Anywho, that's beside the point. It's a fun game. You get to play as a ninja. So if you like the Ninja Gaiden or Gaiden series, you get to throw shurikens. You run around and you're fighting in feudal Japan, and some really cool effects with like lightning and charging up your shurikens, hitting people with your swords, and then a lot of like Shinto spiritualistic type elements that just the game is awesome, and it really has a good atmosphere and vibe to it. So really hard, still really fun game. Revenge of Shinobi for me for 5.
I am looking up these pictures right now as we speak. This is blowing my mind. What the hell? Batman.
Oh yeah, Batman,
Spider-Man, Rocky, and then the best part was those it says were in revision 1 where they switched them all, but then like all the way down in revision 3 they were still like, Godzilla's okay.
We haven't been told no yet.
Yeah. Those people haven't caught us yet.
Oh man, the old days, the Wild West of gaming.
Wow.
Okay, so we're at number 4. So my number 4 is actually another sort of Zelda clone, Landstalker. This was a more isometric style of Zelda game. Beyond Oasis was more like top-down, where up was up, down was down, and etc. This one, Landstalker, was shifted a little bit, so everything was kind of on a diagonal, which gave it kind of a more immersive feel. Things were, paths were easier to hide, that sort of thing. but this one had a lot of heart. It's not compared to Beyond Oasis is the more technically impressive game, but there's just so much in Landstalker that just feels right. Like the characters were a lot of fun. The puzzles actually were puzzles. There was a recurring set of villains that are just completely inept, yet they keep showing up, and every time you fight them, it's just that it's sort of like Team Rocket is blasting off again. There's like little gags like that, and it's just got a lot of personality, a lot of, as I said, heart, and it's just really well put together. Some of the jumping sections are a little wonky because, again, it's everything shifted on the diagonal, so knowing exactly where you're jumping is a little tricky sometimes, but great level design, a lot of secrets, a lot of hidden things, good art, just a really good game, and it deserves more attention than it gets.
It's fun to go through his list because when we did some of the other previous gaming lists, I felt like we all had very similar games, just in different order. We have such a variety of different things. Like I've never even played that game, but a lot of these sound like they'd be enjoyable to try them at some point. The remainder of my list is kind of really heavily skewed one way here, but we can talk about it later. But continuing on here, number 4 for me is Shining Force 2.
Oh,
which
nice.
was
some overlap here.
It's a fantasy RPG, and similar to Justin had mentioned Shining Force 1, which it's a tactical kind of turn-based, kind of Fire Emblem-esque, for something more modern. And so all the battles were on a map that was a grid, so it wasn't like you had you had to move in boxes, and you had a certain amount of moves each character could go. You had up to 30 different characters that you could recruit onto your team, and then you would pick then a list. I think it was 12, a team of 12 that you would go actually into battle with. And there's kind of the typical kind of characters pick from. You had like human fighters, healers, mages. You had centaurs. You had birdmen. There was a phoenix in this one, and a robot, and some other kind of different unique stuff too, which is really fun. And Justin had mentioned Shining Force 1, but Shining Force 1 and 2 were very similar in very many ways. So like you mentioned, the character sprites and stuff were very vibrant and colorful, and like the whole world was really kind of, it was bright, and it like things kind of like popped out from the map easily. They didn't like, things weren't kind of like blended into each other. It was a really nice looking game to play. And again, there was some really kind of cool music in here. The fighting animations were really enjoyable. So like when you went into a battle, it would like cut to like a scene where you could, you saw your characters like fighting against each other actually. And another one of the cool parts about this was you would, when characters leveled up to a certain point, you could promote them, and they would start, their stats would start growing much faster at that point, and they would usually, not everybody, but most of them looked a lot more badass. Like after that point, they like their sprite would change, and their kind of their other, just the way they looked was pretty cool. So this had a great story to it. It's a lot larger than the first one that I remember. Like the whole map region was bigger, and they had a bunch of other little improvements as well. But Shining Force 2.
Awesome. My number 4 is the only game on my list that I did not play as a kid. I played it more recently on the Nintendo service, actually, of all places. This was a Japanese only release, original, and this is called James Hetfield and the White Castle of Fear. It's about a struggling musician who forms a band and goes on the road, and they go on to take over the planet. There's a fight against a boss called Napster. That was a tough one, but they got through that one okay.
And I started writing this down. It's like, this isn't a game.
Sorry, no, I just got new glasses this past Monday. It actually says Streets of Rage. It's Streets of Rage 1, actually. So sorry about that. Same thing. Lots of punching. Next.
Right. I mean, I feel like, man, I'm getting down to it. My fourth is actually a couple of these are like slash, because I feel like they're tied for me. So I'm gonna.
The one about the musician with the top hat and the cigarette. I love that one.
That's so good. No, it's a Disney game. Disney made there were some really good Disney games on the Genesis, but I think one of my favorites
If you say Pinocchio, so help me.
It's Pinocchio. It's Little Mermaid. No, just kidding. It's Quackshot with Donald Duck.
What?
And
Oh man,
it's such a good game. It's a platformer. Donald Duck.
So you can make up games. I can't make up games. I see what's going on.
Yeah,
I forgot about that one.
It's so good. It's really, really nice detailed sprites. I would say it's on par with Mickey Mouse Castle of Illusion, but I love the fact that you can revisit stages as you go. So there's Duckburg. You visit Transylvania. It's spooky. It's got a lot of ambience in different stages. It's got a really good soundtrack. Donald Duck shoots plungers with a gun, and he can upgrade his plungers, and then you enhance your platforming that way. You get to do some pyramids in Egypt and Cairo. Like, it's really cool, varied stages, and it's just a really fun game. There was a couple stages that are really challenging. If you think like the Donkey Kong Country Kart level is hard, there's one where you're basically on like a zip line across stages and you have to jump between different sets of chain to continue on in the platform. And so I think it was really clever, a really neat game, and that maybe I don't think it necessarily pops up time to time on top 10, but it's certainly on mine for sure.
I can tell just by looking at images that it's a fun game.
Yeah, that is a solid choice. I actually forgot about that one. Okay, top three. So my top three is one that I somehow don't think has been mentioned. The first game in the series has been mentioned. The third has been mentioned. I don't think Streets of Rage 2 has come up yet. But it similar to Sonic 2. It took everything the first game did and just made it better. A couple of recurring characters, Axel and Blaze. They do have names, Cody.
Okay.
The son of one of the other characters, Skate, who is the son of Adam, is in it. But it is just a really cool. And there's like a big wrestler guy. I don't know if he's actually connected to anybody, but
it's like the Ultimate War, or Max, right?
Max, yes, yeah. But yeah, each of them played differently. Like Skate was, fast and didn't hit very hard, but Max was a powerhouse, but was slow as bricks. But
bricks don't move, actually.
He's very slow.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's just great stages, a lot of enemy variety, good sprite work. The soundtrack is incredible. Someone earlier I think Blue mentioned that it took a really talented composer to do better music on the Genesis than on the Super Nintendo. Yuzo Koshiro is the composer for the Streets of Rage games, and he knocked it out of the park for each one. But I honestly think the soundtrack for 2 is the absolute best. It's jazzy, it's got energy, it is just perfect. Yep. Seriously, listeners at home, if you haven't played these games, just Google go to YouTube, go to Streets of Rage 2 soundtrack. You won't regret it. It's incredible.
There's a playlist of, I don't know if you've seen it, Henry, but it's like a live concert of Yuzo Koshiro, and I believe who was the second composer on that? It was
Koshiro's the one I remember.
Yeah, Motohiro Kawashima.
Okay,
he was the first one, I think, on the second game. So they're basically just like jamming and playing their own music on, modern day computers, but like fantastic. Yeah, without a doubt. Like that's the best use of the Sega Genesis sound chip.
Yes, I'll have to check that out because I was not aware that existed, but that sounds awesome.
I'll send you the link afterwards.
Thanks.
And Cody, I'm also offended that you named Streets of Rage as your number 4, but you didn't mention that you get to like basically fight the Ultimate Warrior. Like, you love wrestling? You forgot to mention that you fight Ultimate Warrior on a beach.
You probably never got that far.
Yeah, you probably just bad at the game.
Shame.
I didn't. The buttons were different. I didn't know how to start the game.
Idiot. Sorry, Brad. Go ahead.
What's the C button? I don't know.
There's 6 buttons on this thing. What the crap? Number 3 for me. I had Sonic 2.
Ooh.
Which has been mentioned a couple times already, but just for, I guess, for a real quick view, in case anybody actually doesn't know what Sonic is. So basically, it was a side-scrolling platformer, but you'd go with it really fast. You would curl up a little ball and just zip along. As I said before, this game played like exactly the same as the first one, but they did make several improvements as Justin mentioned, like the spin dash made things much easier to get around. The level design was better so that you could actually, you could keep your momentum through the stages much easier. You didn't like smack into a wall or something because you're off like by the fraction of a whatever. And yeah, it just was it was a blast to play. Tails was introduced in this one, which was kind of cool. If you did have someone else wanted to play with you, they could control Tails and like collect rings and things for you. And the pinball type stages were really fun as always. And as you said, the music was really enjoyable as well. So I definitely I spent a lot of time on this one. And this was the only one the only Sonic game that I put on my list. Basically because they were all so similar. I just basically said, I'm just going to pick one of them, and this was the best one of the 3. So
I think it has the best Chaos Emerald like bonus stage out of
that was a lot of fun too. Yeah,
like the first one has the pinball kind of like rotating, but I really love the behind the view when you're like racing trying to collect rings, and you could go Super Saiyan. You basically could, if you get all the Chaos Emeralds, you could you could turn into Supersonic, which was a fun thing too.
It's not as fast as Sonic 2. My number 3 pick, Sonic 1.
I mean, you're not wrong.
I mean, I don't have a ton to add about this, honestly. But for me, so here's the thing: because I was so Nintendo when Sonic came out and the Genesis kind of like entered the marketplace, like he being Sonic, the actual character, was like the personification of Nintendo's enemy now. So that was like this.
I can see that.
Yeah. You had like this, I don't know what you would say, like it's not tangible, but like a symbol, I guess, of like what you put your hatred towards. And you're like, who is this guy? But secretly, you're kind of like, all right, this dude moves pretty fast, and he's got like a different style of platforming that's going on here, and it's a different kind of story. The stages look, vastly different than the Mario stages. I guess if you like took some of the crazier Mario stages and made them look more 3D-ish, maybe they might not be that far apart for some of the stages, but it was just so different from what I was used to. And so I think I secretly have some respect for Sonic here. So I'm going to go with the OG for number 3 for me.
Nice.
He did do what Nintendo don't.
Yeah. He did do what Nintendo don't, which is go out of business. So
they still exist. They're still making games.
Yeah,
that's true. Now they are on other systems. So there you go.
Yeah.
My 3rd game hasn't been mentioned. Maybe it's up here because I think it's one of the best games, and maybe it'll be on your all's list. But it is made by a company who is composed of folks who got tired of making the same game for Konami, and it is Gunstar Heroes. It's a run and gun. It is by far one of the best games that Treasure has made. It was the first game that Treasure put out, and so basically this company was like, hey, this group of people are like, we're tired of making Castlevania games. We're tired of making Contra, which also sounds absurd if you think about it. But they were involved with like Bucky O'Hare on NES. Basically what Treasure was and what Gunstar Heroes was is a run and gun game, had a health system here. And each of the characters had a different way of firing. So instead of like power-ups that you would collect, each of your Gunstar heroes would have a different way of shooting. And so really fun bosses. Basically every stage is almost like a boss rush. And so you basically just get to the end, fight the boss, rinse and repeat, do it again. Really, really fun, fast action. And just, I think Treasure goes on to make brilliant games that people have or haven't heard of. Like Ikaruga is a really good one that was on the Dreamcast arcade. They also made Radiant Silvergun, but they also have a really obscure Ronald McDonald game that is also on the Sega Genesis. So
it's really good.
It's really good. You're like, oh, McDonald's game, this is going to be absolute shit. And it's actually quite surprisingly good. And then like some other obscure games like Mischief Makers on the Nintendo 64 was also treasure. And I'm trying to remember, wasn't there another one? Like what's the one with the Saturn? It's another beat 'em up on Saturn. It's kind of more of a
Guardian Heroes or something.
Yeah,
like
Guardian
that?
Heroes. So
yeah, Guardian Legends, something like that. Yeah.
Treasure just needs to be mentioned because really, without Gunstar Heroes, I don't think you'd see the similar success for that team. And man, I feel like they just literally shit out gold in terms of the production value that they have in their games.
Agreed. And speaking of treasure, my number 2 is another game of theirs, Dynamite Headdy, which is another platformer. The premise of this one is it kind of sets the stage for how weird things are going to get. So it's set in a kingdom of toys, where I think the big bad evil guy, his name is like Dark Demon or something like that. But he decides to invade and take things over, and so he starts kidnapping all of the toys to turn them into his minions. And you play as one who gets discarded because your head is loose. And so he figures, I don't want a defective minion, so he just like tosses you out, and then it's up to you to save the world. And the key point about your head being loose is you can swap out your heads for other heads. So your main one is you can like throw it and it hits people and you do damage, but you can have one that's like spikes that you can throw and hit walls and like launch yourself towards them. There's one that works like a boomerang. There's one that slows people down or puts them to sleep, and there's like a whole bunch of them. And it's just such a creative, weird, bright and colorful game that full of secrets, full of just strange characters. There's like a secret level I think you unlock at the end if you find a bunch of hidden codes throughout the regular stages that gives you a password that you have to unlock. So there's a surprising amount of depth to it, and it's just an incredible game. And further evidence that Treasure is a company that more people should be aware of, because everything they've made has been a lot of fun.
How did you all just change positions on my screen? What just happened here?
I saw that too.
Oh yeah,
I didn't do it.
Quickly muted my video because it got fuzzy, and then I turned it back. Viewers at home, this is what happened.
Gotcha.
I was like, wait, does I thought maybe the one of you like swapped positions on your screen because you like them to be like rotating in the order that we were talking in.
We're secretly in the same house, so one of us just got up and moved to the other.
I get it. Yeah. Okay. All right, number 2 for me is sequel of one of my games I mentioned before, and that was Phantasy Star 4. So now this game played basically exactly the same way as Phantasy Star 2 did, which was kind of, so just real quick, Phantasy Star 3 was actually quite a bit different. They like the base gameplay was the same, but the look and the feel of it was kind of actually vastly different. But Phantasy Star 4 came back and was very, very similar to Phantasy Star 2. But they did have a lot of improvements. The graphics were a little bit cleaner, and the story was a lot more fleshed out. There was more dialogue and just more background to the world. They had a lot of mechanics which were really cool, including combo attacks, which was really amazing. If you could, it'd be pretty tough to find them just kind of by accident. So a lot of these you had to use a guide or something to do them. But essentially, if you set up your team so that, say, for example, one character uses a fire-based attack, and then the very next character you have uses a wind-based attack, they would actually combine, and you'd get like this flaming tornado attack. And I think you could actually get, was the max combo like all 5 characters? I don't remember if it was 5 or it was like 3. I'm not remembering that now, but
I think
you could get like multiple characters into a combo attack, which is pretty amazing. It also had macros, which was great. So you could just, if you like wanted just all 5 of your characters to just use just a basic attack that round, you just would hit the macro you created to do that, and it would just do it. You didn't have to go in and select the action for every
menus,
single
yeah.
character, which was amazing addition. And as I've been saying, this one had a 5-character battle team, which the original game had a 4-character team. But what was interesting was, as you played through, you never had more than 5 characters on your team. Characters would leave and go off and do other things, or you would gain and lose characters as you progress through the story. So you never had extra people to pick from. But it was interesting how that, it kind of changed out on its, because it's automatically on its own. But yeah, I just, as I said, these two were very similar to Phantasy Star 2, which I enjoyed greatly. But this one I had some improvements, which put up here number 2 for me.
Good choice.
Likes those games, I tell you. All right, my number 2. I can't believe you started writing down James Hetfield and the White Castle of Fear as a real game. But anyway, my number 2 has been mentioned already, so look out for bonus points here, ladies and gents. It's Streets of Rage Part 2. I got all 3 of them in my top 5 just because I liked beating the hell out of things. Insert joke. But anyway, yeah, no, it's just fun. Like, again, it's good fun smasher. It's like arcade style, but it was at home. That was one of those games that truly felt like you were playing an arcade game, but you were at home on the Genesis, which was awesome. And I had forgot about the soundtrack until you guys mentioned that, but I do recall that it had some pretty jazzy little tunes there as you were going through. And I always love those like typical like side-scrolling beat 'em up games too that have like the ridiculous stereotype bad guys, like, and at this point they've done all of the like weird ones even too. So like at this point you're like, oh, dude's got a boombox but he's wearing a tutu and he's on roller skates. Seen it, let's beat him up. So that's kind of fun too. But that's my number 2.
Nice choice. Yep. I feel like this is one that hasn't been on the list. It got in the honorable mentions, which is surprising to me, but it is the Sonic game that I actually played the most, and probably the first one I beat and in its entirety, like got the Chaos Emeralds, probably because of the fact that it has a save feature. So I think Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and then / Knuckles, because I think you'd be remiss not to mention Sonic and Knuckles. You could actually, if you have just pause, I'm going to go on a quick tangent, listeners. You can, if you have the original Sega Genesis 1, and if you had the Sega CD 1, it would stack underneath, and then you put the 32X on top of it, and then you put Sonic Knuckles on top of the 32X, and then you put the Game Genie on top of that, and you put Sonic 3 on top of that, but then you put a Game Cleaner on top of that. And basically, you can make this huge tower of power, is what I'm saying. And
so you form Exodia and win the game.
Yeah, you basically just turn in your Sega Genesis into a great, Ronin or Zoids, or
Voltron.
But anyway, I love Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Little known fact, maybe it's urban legend or a rumor, but evidently Michael Jackson may have worked on this, producing the soundtrack there. It's like really just loosely tangential. It's like if it's been on, like, for example, Brett's background is this Mega Drive Classics. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was missing from that compilation. Possibly due to the estate of Michael Jackson not renewing the license, but it was on the previous Xbox 360 and PlayStation Sonic Mega Drive hits or whatnot, or Ultimate Hits. But Sonic the Hedgehog 3 had you basically could run through with Tails again, Sonic and Knuckles, that you play any of the base Sonic the Hedgehog games as Knuckles, and they both came out and their own standalone games. But Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is awesome. Also really iconic soundtrack. Could go Supersonic again as soon as you got the Chaos Emeralds. And yeah, I love that one. That's the Sonic game that I beat to death along with Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Nice. Okay, number 1s. Drum roll. So mine. No, mine has already been mentioned. Gunstar Heroes, and for good reason. This game is just absolutely incredible. And Blue didn't even mention like some of the best parts of it.
Oh,
Like,
throw some shade, boy.
Well, no. I mean, yes, each character does control a bit differently. Like one of them, you run and gun, and if you press like up and to the right when you're running, you'll just keep running forward, but you'll shoot up and to the right. The other one will pause in place, and you can like aim as you go. But there are 4 different weapons in the game. There's like a straight shot, a homing shot, a laser, and a flamethrower. But you can combine, you can collect essentially 2 weapons at once, and depending on which weapons you pick up, that will change what your gun does. So you can double up on the flamethrower and just have your flame shoot further, or you can hit the flamethrower into homing bullets, and you'll have flames that will chase everyone across the screen and do continuous damage. Or you could have like the flamethrower and the laser and have a really short range but incredibly powerful like plasma cutter, basically. And that was a lot of the fun of the game. It was finding combinations that worked for each situation, and it really added a lot of strategy, a lot of replayability. And on top of that, it wasn't just gunplay. You could actually like do melee moves with your enemies. You could pick them up and throw them. You could like slide through them and knock them down that way. There was just so much that this game had to offer, and I mean, the levels were huge. The bosses were huge. There was one boss where you didn't fight him directly, but he made you like throw this giant die and move across a game board that would determine what you did at any particular point of the fight. I mean, it was just relentlessly creative and a ton of fun to play and hard as nails. I mean, all things that I respect and enjoy in games today. Gunstar Heroes is an all-time classic, and if you haven't played it, you're missing out.
Speaking of that, Gunstar Heroes is basically in every single top 5 list that I've ever seen, but is not on mine because I never played it.
Scratch that notch out of the list here, Pilot.
What is on my list is was one of my favorite games of all time, and one that I would pick up and play right now after we finish this podcast if I wanted to. Shining Force 1 is a game that I just love to death. It, as we kind of mentioned a couple times before, it's Shining Force 1 and 2 were basically the same game, just with a different story and different characters. They played exactly the same. They were both very enjoyable in that way. And while Shining Force 2 actually did make some improvements to the game, with the kind of like the expanded map and a bit more of an expanded story and a little bit more like Shining Force 1, you were basically locked into a kind of a linear path. Shining Force 2, you got to a point where you could go around the map and pick your battles. But what made Shining Force 1 better for me over 2 was, I thought the story, just the overall story, was better. The final battle was more trickier. It took a little more strategy and was really fun. And the ending is like really dramatic and moving. It's was pretty kind of, for me at that time, was probably one of the first games where you get to the end and you're like, we beat the game, but I'm not sure that I won the game, because the way the game ends, you're like, oh no, this was my guy. And not to spoil a 30-year-old game for anybody, but it really is. It's the masterpiece of RPGs, as far as I'm concerned. And it had one of the more fun characters this character was named Jogurt. Was essentially it's like a hamster wearing a helmet and was completely useless in the game. Like it would never do like more than 1 damage, and even if you would like really kind of like pick and choose your way like through battles, and like, so like you could knock down an enemy to like 1 HP with somebody like one of your strong ones, and come in with Jogurt and like knock him out and kill him. Like, even if you like managed to level him up, if you got to the point where you could promote him, it didn't change at all. It's like completely pointless. I actually did manage to like get to that point once, but just a really kind of goofy. And it was a character that you actually had to like do something special to even get him.
Mhm.
But it was just this joke character that like it was not useful at all, but just funny. But yeah, the Shining Fortress 1, I could play that at any point. Love it.
Joker's great. He's got a football helmet. It's pretty awesome. We're looking at this.
Then there was the jellyfish you could hatch from an egg if you searched a certain area that floated in the air and cast ice magic. I mean, it was a weird game, but a good one.
All right, my number one game.
Oh my goodness, here it comes. What
you
what
know
am I
nothing.
about to write down?
Here you go.
Some elaborate
First I tricked these three into doing a Sega Genesis podcast so I could talk about this game.
Oh no.
That's right.
By you, Billy.
If I saw a cheap Sega Genesis in this game, I would consider purchasing them so I could play this game again. This game combines all the elements that you want in a perfect game.
Buster Douglas boxing. Got it. Yep. Got it.
Got it.
All right. My number one is.
Yep. Buster Douglas boxing. No, just kidding. It is Brett may have not known how influential that camping tent was that he had at the campground. However,
where's this story going?
From this comes my number one all-time Sega Genesis game, which I played quite a bit with him and others in the tent, and would easily, again, go pick up this game if I had it here right after this podcast and play it again. This is all of the fun elements of Tetris mixed with real-time strategy, mixed with player versus player, mixed with player versus computer. And this is Rampart, the best Sega Genesis game of all time, bar none. This game is amazing. It's got like a panic sense to it because you're working against the clock. You got people attacking each other. You're trying to rebuild your castle with the pieces they give you. Try to surround more castles so you can expand your territory each round. Shoot with your cannons to decide where you want to put your cannons. I don't know how many games of this we played. That one time we were camping there. I should mention Brett and I were not camping together either. We were just happened to be there at the same week. But he showed me this game and I was like, this game is amazing. Oh my God. And I see there is ports of it for like 10 different systems, but not anything as of real recently, because I was hoping maybe I could find it on like looks like maybe the GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox gen. There is a version on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, but that seems to be the latest one that has come out. But yeah, this game is just super fun. Oh my gosh, just like get the wrong piece and be like, no shit, no, I put it in the wrong spot. No, damn it. I got to make a full circle or you lose your territory. And then kind of like, especially like there's a 3-player option, I think, too. So you could like gang up on somebody if they were like ahead and try to like bring that person back down a little bit so the other two people could catch up a little bit. I don't even remember how the games ended, if it was time or if it was actually till somebody lost, but I know we played quite a bit of it that week that we were there. And this is bar none. Like when I started this list, I was like, Rampart's 1, and then I researched the other 900 games that came out for the Genesis. That's my number one all time, people.
That was the worst when you were trying to build your castle and you didn't complete the wall, and you're like, well, I'm screwed.
That's like I've only played a limited, but I do remember that I love tower defense games, and I feel like that is really the first one that ever existed.
Yeah, it says in the Wikipedia entry it was like 10 years before the first tower defense games came out.
Yeah. Oh, good choice. I feel like somebody had it as an honorable mention too, so I want to make sure.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. Okay. I was out of the room at that point. I missed that. Dang it.
I feel like
I was like, is it his number one? Is it his number one?
But it does have some weight because I'm trying to, listeners, I've been tallying, but I'm just trying to figure out with weighted averages here. I'm not going to go that granular, but if somebody has it as an honorable mention and a number one, that should be added to the list as far as how many to a tally. I would say my number one is a tie, but since it's
wait a second.
It's a theme here.
Makes 11.
1.5.
I'm just going to stick with Streets of Rage 2. It's by far, I love 1. I think 1 soundtrack is, that's the first Streets of Rage game that I ever played. It is the first one that came out. But Streets of Rage 2, man, I just played it to ad nauseum. It is similarly like how Cody loves Rampart. I could just fire up Streets of Rage 2 and probably blaze through it, no pun intended. And it's just so good. I mean, I love some other things that haven't been mentioned about it. Like you can hear basically Axel, if you do his toward punch move, he says the Japanese name of the game, which is bare knuckle. It's a lot of like fun. I think Yuzo Koshiro just nailed that soundtrack. I like the aspect that it's a redone special system as opposed to cops rolling up and shooting like either a machine gun or a rocket launcher in the first one. Really relies on elements with some balancing of how you manage your health and try not to get hit, which is important, but you can't use special if you're down to like your last elements of health. So you have to manage your resources while also interacting on the plane while you're beating people up. And I feel like that Streets of Rage 2 is probably a reason why Streets of Rage 3 happened. And then, decades later, we've got Streets of Rage 4, which is also awesome and available on like PS4, Switch, Xbox. Fantastic game. I love Streets of Rage 2. So guys, if you want, feel free to like have some more banter. I'm going to tally here. I have some quick napkin math. I have some commonalities if you want to hear what games ended up being synonymous in our lists.
Good old napkin math.
Yeah.
Best math.
Yeah.
I guess as we were talking, there's one that I always enjoyed, but I don't know if I'd put it necessarily in my top anything, but Zombies Ate My Neighbors, where it's like every horror movie from the 80s kind of crammed together into one thing, and you're a teenager trying to save your neighborhood from zombies or like a serial killer or vampires or and it was fun, but in a way it was almost too long, I think, because it had just 60 levels or something like that. It was something stupid,
pretty long.
Yeah,
that's what she said.
Oh, come on now.
But
here, why you gotta do that?
Here's the quick count. So if we start at the honorable mentions, Rampart, 2 votes for it. Castlevania and Contra both have 2 votes for it. When we start getting into lists, here's games that had 2 votes as well. Road Rash 2, Altered Beast, Toe Jam and Earl, Mortal Kombat 2, Shining Force 2, and then Phantasy Star 4/2. Like I think just
also Gunstar Heroes. Did you say Gunstar Heroes?
Gunstar Heroes did actually, I had 2, but then Brett pulled a fakie on me and did not say it was. So there was briefly a third notch, but
okay.
And then in terms of 3 votes, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 came up for 3 of the 4. And then one that is on all of our lists is Streets of Rage 2. So that may be the best Genesis game that has ever been made.
Streets of Rage 2 is our winner?
I think so.
I'm okay with that.
I mean, that's pretty solid. I'm not going to lie.
I mean, yeah, it's an incredible game, especially if you're playing with a friend. I mean, it's just a good old-fashioned beat 'em up, and yeah, it's a blast.
I mean, who had it fairly low on their list? Because that's who we need to make fun of. I mean, just double check.
I had it as an honorable mention.
Oh my God, that's even worse, Brett.
I had it higher. Ha
It was funny. Like I mentioned it before that like the top half of my list was really kind of weighted a certain way. And what's funny is that the Genesis is when I really started getting into the RPGs. Like 4 of my top 5 were all RPGs, and it's like a funny story because I actually, I had Nintendo Power back in the day, and I actually wrote a letter to Nintendo. I was like, man, I really love these Sega RPGs. Why aren't you making more RPGs? And like looking back on it now, it's just completely short-sighted and stupid because they had plenty of RPGs. I just didn't know about them, despite having this magazine that told me about them. So
that's funny.
But yeah,
I want to find a copy of that issue where you asked that question. Have you signed it?
Yeah.
I don't think it was in the magazine, but
they're probably like, who is this kid?
I got 2 updates quick. One, since I spoke last here on this podcast, I just purchased a copy of Rampage that's coming in the mail. So there's that.
You mean Rampart?
Yeah. Yes, actually, I might have both. Actually, it's the Midway Treasure Collection, so I actually might have both on it. But yes, Rampart. Yes, sorry. They had somebody was selling disc only on eBay, so I snatched that up. So that'll be here in a little bit. So we will play some Rampage after all. Hopefully, it's the right version that I like. But anyway, and secondly, we got to give a shout out to Blue, who bought a house tonight.
Woo!
Congratulations.
It's got a basement,
Yay.
so we can put all. Justine's like, "We'll put all your games in there." I'm like, yeah. I turned it into a den, and then we can get sloppy and fall up the stairs after playing one too many rounds of Rampart.
Hey, yes, or Rampage, whatever it is, or Streets of Rampage, or Road Rash Page, or Road Rage Pash Streets.
Which Rampage
Ew.
game is it you like?
You
You said it was a disc one. For what console?
It's for the GameCube, but it's the like arcade classics collection from
Okay.
Midway.
See. Yep.
So
Gotcha.
hopefully
Okay, you
it's
mentioned that part.
roughly the same. We'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe I can make my kids play it with me. Oh, your castle broke. Sorry.
Yeah.
No
That'll-
mercy.
That'll last a whole day of playing it.
But thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not an easy feat to accomplish in this day and age.
Oh no, I am just grateful to be back in Michigan, and then we can all be united. I got Cody excited because it was
Yeah, you did.
Did you move to Illinois? And I said no, but we'll be on like Illinois Street. is that good enough?
Oh.
It's
No.
not.
You're closer to Brett than anybody now. Well, actually, it might be close. Actually, you might still be closer to Joe than Brett, but it's close.
Yeah.
Are you still like far, like the northern lower, Brett?
Yeah.
Okay.
Up in the corner there.
Oh, in the corner. I'll be in the other corner, and then Joe's in the other corner. There's only one corner left.
And I claim it because I'm way up north in no man's land.
Yeah, that is the corner.
Yeah, it is the corner. All right.
Well, anything to bring us home here?
Kaboom. 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 Kaboom.
Yeah. So thanks, guys. It's been a lovely evening, and if you don't like our list, then you can disagree with us if you want, because that's the
share
name
some of
the
your
show.
favorites.
Yeah, check us out on Facebook and TikTok and all those places.
Where you
MySpace.
consume your podcasts.
Yeah. All those
Right.
things.
So do we need to
Alrighty.
sing us out, or was
I think
the
somebody technically
Chemical
has
Zone
the Twitter
theme?
account, but I don't know who has that. Joe, maybe? I don't know who has Twitter. Somebody does. Anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, we own the Gmail. That's all that's important. So there we go.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Blue, you're leading us in a song?
Oh, friends. Occasionally.
Keep it
not
not
disagree.
occasionally not disagree.
I'm
Street Rage
surprised.
characters don't have names.
Isn't there a Three Ninjas game? There's a Three Ninjas game that came out on Genesis.
Three Ninjas Kick Back. I made that joke in the man group, which you should attend sometime. But that was the first one. That was the first one listed alphabetically, and I was like, "That's it. I'm done. It's not gonna get better than that."
Sorry, I'm bad at social medias.
Blue's been moving, so our inside joke has been we put a wanted poster of a missing kid up on our Facebook group, which he didn't see forever, so it didn't really work. But
I'm gonna go look at it now.
we had a good laugh about it, so there we go.
Yeah.
Oh,
All
boy.
right.
Well,
Take care,
thanks, y'all.
everyone.
Yep, take care.
All right. Good night.